Designer Wolfgang Warsch had a breakthrough year in 2018, releasing 4 titles in the first half of the year, with 3 of those titles being nominated for Germany's largest gaming awards. The Mine from NSV was nominated for Spiel des Jahres, and 2 titles from Schmidt Spiele, Ganz schön clever and Die Quacksalber von Quedlinburg, were nominated for Kenner Spiel des Jahres, or Enthusiast Game of the Year, with Quacksalber winning. This is a big box game in which you are making potions, and there's a lot of luck to the game. Some turns you bust, you don't do much at all, and other turns you really put a lot of stuff in your pot, which is going to let you buy more ingredients and further your growth. So, that game had huge success. There were editions in multiple languages. North Star Games released it in English. There was an expansion released by Schmidt in the first half of 2019, and Schmidt and Warsch have come together for another game, Die Tavernen im Tiefen Thal, which is the Taverns of the Deep Valley, which is similar in spirit to Quacksalber, even though the mechanisms of the game and the setting are not similar at all. But as you're learning the Tavernen, if you played Quacksalber, you'll feel a lot of familiarity with how things play out once you actually get into the game. Here are some of the components in Die Tavernen im Tiefen Thal. You have a round board that keeps track of the 8 rounds of the game, with something new being introduced to players in each of the 8 rounds. You have a monastery track, in which people are not keeping track of their score, but just their standing with the monastery, and they will get bonuses when they pass or land on certain spaces on the track. Each player has their own tavern that shows what's present in their tavern. You have a place to receive beer, to store your money. You have a monk who's here ready to buy money and give you enlightenment to move around the track. You've got a few tables, and you have a deck that is the same for each player, which consists of 7 regular guests and a few upgrades. You have decks with other upgrades available, as well as guests and nobles that you can attract to your tavern. At the end of the game, you're going to score points only for what's in your deck. So, your goal is to add as many of these cards to your deck as possible in order to score, with your primary target being the nobles that are worth 10 points each. When you start looking at the components for Tavernen, you notice similarities between that and Quacksalber. Quacksalber also has a round board that introduces different things in certain rounds. You have a point tracker where the points are all on cards in Tavernen, but you keep track of the monastery track and you get bonuses. You also get bonuses on the point track based on how far back you are. Each player has their own cauldron in Quacksalber, where you're brewing your own thing, and what you do on your board is not affecting what happens on anyone else's in general. Each round in Tavernen, you get a bonus based on whatever is depicted for that particular round. In rounds 1, 4, and 6, you get a double-sided guest that gives you a bonus at certain times in the game, where it's a one-shot use. Use them, and they leave. Otherwise, they just sit at your bar until you're ready to call on their abilities. In the second round, you get a semi-regular guest or a beer merchant. In round 3, you get a dishwasher or a waitress. Later on, an extra table or a beer supplier. In the final round, you get a free upgrade. You need upgrades throughout the course of the game in order to improve your tavern, and you want to do that as much as possible, because with each upgrade, you get a free noble. As in Quacksalber, Tavernen is all about combos. You're trying to put everything together and have massive rounds where you get lots of money or lots of beer in order to make things happen. Not everything is under your control, though. Each player starts the game with the same deck of 10 cards. You have 7 regular guests, in addition to a waitress, an extra table, and a beer supplier. And after you get your bonus in the first round, you shuffle your deck, and then you start laying out cards, and you lay them out based on what is depicted on the card. So regular guests go at the tables, and when you fill your tables, that's it. You draw no more cards for the round. So all I have here is a few cheap guests. I have nothing else going on in my tavern. It's not great. I can just stay with that, or I can discard this special guest, and I clear the tavern, and then start again. Another guest. Now an extra table so I can sit one more person. Keep going here. I have a waitress that is going to give me an extra die. I have a beer supplier that's going to give me extra beer when I do get beer. And that's everything in my deck. So we're all set. Everyone does this. And so we're going to end up with different things in our tavern based on what is in our deck and the order that things come up. Once everyone has done this, you roll your 4 regular dice. I have a waitress, so I roll 1 die of my color, and I keep that separate. And then I put the dice on my tray here. And in player order, we each choose one of these dice, and we can place it on our tavern, or we can place it on a card as we wish. And we pass that on to the next player. We'll get one from a neighbor. We choose something else. Maybe I go here. No. We'll do a beer supply. Pass it on. We get another one. Yep. And then we'll do monk. And get a last die. And there we go. Now we allocate our dice to different places. Some cards require specific numbers. So the guest initially only take 1 or 2s. A 5 can be used for a monk. 1 and 6 can be used for a beer supply. And any die can go in your own personal barrel, where you have your own special brew. And you're rating the cash box here. And you can do that once with any die. This is once. This is as many dice as you want. As many dice. And only 1 for these, please. Then they're full. Once everyone has allocated their dice, in player order, you are going to resolve the dice and do something. So if I serve this person their beer, they give me 2 money. I can go over here and I can spend 2 money to get a beer merchant. I'm rating the cash box for an extra doubloon. Now I have 3. I can hire a dishwasher or a beer merchant. Let's say I do a beer merchant. When I get the card, I put it on top of the deck. So each time you get something, you know what's coming up in the future, which is a nice bonus, a way to plan ahead for future turns. So buy something, know what's coming up. I have 2 money, 1 money. I only spent 2 on this, so I'll save 1 here. I will advance once on the monastery track. Okay. I'm halfway to a beer merchant, and I can get other bonuses as I go around. This is resolved. This, any die here, gets me 1 beer, and that's it. I put 1 here, and you get as many beers as the number of beers depicted here. So I get 2, plus 1 here is 3. Well, with 3 beers, I can attract someone, this new guest, that now if I put a 3 on him, I get 3 money. Oh, he's much better than these regular cheapos. And I put him on the top of the deck as well. I spent all my beer. I spent all my money. I only have room to save 2 beer and 2 money at this time. And that's the end of my turn. I'm going to throw away all my cards. The heart of Tavernen is simple. You have a deck of cards. You're going to reveal cards and put them in your tavern. You have no choice on that. You just put them where they're supposed to go. You see what's available to you. How many dice are you rolling? How many beer suppliers you have laid out? How many beer merchants? Beer merchants only bring 1 beer. That's it. The supplier pays out for each die you place there. Supplier is better than merchant. Gotta remember that. Waitresses will bring you more dice. Maybe you'll have more tables. You'll lay out all these things. Then you'll roll your 4 white dice in addition to any colored dice that are only for you. And then you draft the dice and then you do stuff. And ideally, you are going to be drafting dice that pay out and work all together. If you flip over 3 beer suppliers because you've bought them in the past and put them in your deck, well, each die you place there, it pays out 1 beer for the beer that's already depicted plus 3 more. So every die is 4 beer. And ideally, you get lots of beer all at once and can get a high-value guest or even spend that beer for nobles. Or maybe you get valuable guests, and then you can serve all of them at once and get a ton of money. So you're trying to put together all these combo turns, but of course you're at the whim of however you shuffle and how things come up, except for the treasured guest, which will allow you to clear the tavern. You get a few of those during the game. You also have dishwashers that will increase the value of a die by 1. That's it. There's not much dice manipulation. There's not much re-rolling. So it's fairly luck-based in terms of how things come up. But of course, as you buy cards, you're setting up for the next turn. So you have a little look ahead of what you're trying to do. And ideally, you have those big turns that come together. Maybe you'll get lots of money, can buy all sorts of things for your tavern, or you can upgrade it, which is where the real points are. Let's say we're at the beginning of the second round where I can either take a guest from this stack here. You might think of them as silvers, or a beer merchant. I'll take a guest. I put it at the top of my deck. which consists of the cards I bought in the first round, and then I start laying out my cards. So no surprises as to what's coming because I bought or acquired the cards as a bonus, and I know what's coming. And then I shuffle my deck, I lay that out, I start laying out those cards, and now my tables are full. I have no treasured guest, I can't flush everyone out, but this is a decent setup, and if the dice come up my way, I can end up with a lot of money. So now I have 8 money, maybe this comes over here for beer, I get another monk, and now I look here for 8 money. Well, you can upgrade sections of your tavern and they will provide benefits to you over the course of the game. So to upgrade here, I need 12 money, but this little symbol here, which is probably very small and you can't see, says for each waitress that I dismiss from my staff, essentially, I'm going to let her go and not hire her anymore on a part-time basis, but I get to reduce this cost by 4, which is the cost of the waitress card itself. So instead of paying 12, I can discard a waitress and pay only 8. And if I had 2 waitresses, I can discard 2 of them and pay only 4, or discard 3 of them for nothing then. I can spend my 8 money off these cards and upgrade, and now I'll have a permanent waitress, that is an extra die for myself, for the rest of the game. And all of the upgrades work this way where everything suddenly gets a little better. Here's the monk track where I move ahead 1 space on the monastery, but if I upgrade that, now I move ahead 2 spaces for each die I put there. He's a better monk. He knows how to train me better in the monkly arts. With the cash box, I can take 3 money instead of only 1. With the bank, I can store up to 5 money or up to 5 beer. With the beer merchant here, I get 2 beer for every dice that I put here instead of only 1. Similar to this, I can also get a permanent dishwasher. Everything is better, but everything is super expensive. So it's hard to put together these turns. You want to Dominion style, have everything come together at the right time, and now I upgrade, and now I have that die in the future, and that will ideally fuel growth in other areas of my tavern as well. Most important of all when you upgrade is you take a noble from the thick noble stack there, and the nobles function sort of like provinces in Dominion in that they're the thing that you want to shoot for. They're worth 10 points. That's huge. Everything else is at most 4 points for a valuable guest, so you want to get nobles as much as possible, but they're hard to get. And one of the ways to do it is to upgrade a section of your tavern, and that impresses the noble, and then they come and visit you, going on top of your deck, face down, just like every other card you acquire, and they will visit your tavern next turn. Unlike provinces, which are useless during the game, right? Whenever you play Dominion and you draw a province, hopefully you have some special power that will let you discard it and draw something else, or do something with it. Nobles will actually spend money. Not much, right? That's how they're going to keep their money and stay rich, is not spending much at the tavern, but you get to place a die here and you'll get 2 money from them. More importantly, all the nobles that come up in the same turn want to sit at the same table. They don't want to sit with the hoi polloi. They only want to associate with themselves. So even if you get lots of nobles in your deck, then they will pile up at the same table and not end your turn early. You know, comparing it to having lots of provinces in your hand and just having a dud turn. All the nobles will stack up. Now, of course, hopefully you get them all at the same time, but when you start putting big turns together, you can acquire them all at the same time, and then they'll all be at the top of your deck, and they'll all come up together. If you do 2 upgrades at once, then those nobles go together. So if you have a big turn where there's lots of waitresses and dishwashers, you can upgrade all this at once. If you throw away a table, then you get a 5 doubloon discount on upgrading the table area and having an extra permanent table, which is normally 15, but it could be 10 or 5 or nothing. And for each one of those you do, you get a noble worth 10 points. Pile all those onto your deck. During setup, you always have a stack of guests that cost 3 beers, are worth 1 point, and give you 3 money whenever you put a 3 on them. Those are the silvers of Tavernen. You have the nobles as well, but you turn up 4 guests at random from the deck, and each of those has some different combination of cost in terms of beer from 4 to 8, value in points from 1 to 4, some die pictured down here that'll give you money equal to the die you place, and then some of them have bonuses as well that you can sometimes combo during a round. So you can acquire at most 1 guest during a round, but if you acquire this, you also get a beer merchant at the same time, and both of those cards will go on top of your deck. You can buy at most 1 of each of these during a turn. So you could acquire this guest, get a free beer merchant, and then buy a beer merchant as well, and you know you'll have both of those coming up. Or buy a dishwasher, and then you get a free dishwasher with this guest, and then buy a dishwasher, you know you'll have 2 dishwashers, and now both of those will be out, and if you want to upgrade that area, you can discard both those dishwashers, and it'll cost only 3 money instead of 9. Or this one will give you a guest, but it also gives you 4 money immediately. So then you can go and buy something else, or use the 4 money for an upgrade. You have only 2 other ways to acquire nobles in Tavernen. You can move ahead on the monastery track, and at spot 8 and 16 and 22, you'll get a noble and you'll place them on top of the deck, just like every other card you acquire. Or if you get a lot of beer at once, you can buy a noble for beer, or attract them. Yes, they're attracted to the scent of beer. So 9 beer gets you 1 noble, and 18 will get you 3. So it's a much better ratio than 9 to 1. But of course, you have to get that beer all at once. And in my first 2 games, I managed to do that. I got all these beer suppliers. I bought them in round 7. I had some in my deck already. It just all came together. And so I acquired 3 nobles, and then I had an upgrade. So it was 4 nobles at once, 40 points. And the winning score in each of those games was between 90 and 100. So huge chunk of points coming together at the last moment. It's not always going to happen. Sometimes you will bomb out, or it's just the gas isn't there in the car. It's very similar to Quacksalber, where you're pulling ingredients from the bag, and sometimes you'll have nothing, and other times you're just pushing along, bubbling up on that track while someone else is watching you because they bombed out. And there are ways to mitigate that luck a little bit with a treasured guess or with a potion in Quacksalber, but you're not going to eliminate the luck entirely. It's still going to be there. It's going to be a very swingy game with how things come out. And the swinginess kind of accelerates over time because, of course, if you have a good early turn, then that's going to give you more ingredients, or in Tavernen, more money and beer, which is then going to upgrade your tavern or add new additions to it with a waitress that gives you another die, or a guest that's going to give you more money, and everything sort of accelerates on itself, similar to Quacksalber. So it's a very similar feel in the 2 games, even though they're not similar in what you're actually doing. It's just the spirit of them. With Quacksalber, you get a lot of variability in the game based on what the ingredients are doing in your particular game. For most colors, you have 4 options available to you in terms of special powers, and you use only one of those 4. So you can lay out a purple one and a green one, and you can learn what those are, but everything isn't piled up all at once. You just have to learn a few new things each time you play as you change out the spellbooks. Tavernen works a little differently in that the expansions all pile up on one another. So with the first expansion, you flip over the monastery board, and now you're going to serve a new drink at your tavern. You will have schnapps available, and you'll get 1 or 2 schnapps after certain rounds. And now instead of getting dishwashers and waitresses, you are having guests. So at second round, you get this guest who comes to your bar, and you must decide which side of the guest you want face up. With this one, if you feed them 1 schnapps, you get 2 money, and you can do that as many times as you want, but of course, you only have 1 schnapps when you first acquire them. And then you'll get 2 more here, and you can pile up the schnapps. You can have at most 4 at the end of a turn, or you can spend them bit by bit. Maybe you just need a little bit more money to upgrade something, and then that will give you more money down the road to compound your growth. Or you get this other side where you spend 2 schnapps and get 3 beer. And in round 3, you'll get this jester, or if you spend 5 schnapps, you get an upgrade, which comes with a noble, which is huge, but you have to build up to 5 schnapps, which takes a while. Or you can spend 2 schnapps to get rid of a guest permanently. One of your regulars just takes a hike out of town into a ditch somewhere. I'm not sure, but he's never seen again. With this last one, you can spend the schnapps to put a used card back on top of your deck, so you get to use it again, or you get to set a die to the face that you want, an additional way to modify your luck. With the next expansion, you have to use this board, but you turn over these tokens, so you get less schnapps during the game itself. You still get a couple, they're still on the monastery track, but now you have an additional reputation track. I'm not sure who's judging you, I guess the people in town. And each turn, you're going to get money and beer like normal, and whatever the lower one of those numbers is, you get that much reputation. So if you earn no money, you get no reputation. If you got 3 of each, you go up 3 spaces, and on 3, you get a schnapps here. And you go along again, you get schnapps, you get to remove one of your guests, you go up here, and you get a noble. So there's less schnapps on the track based on just the rounds. You have to earn it with reputation going around the track. And at the end of the game, wherever this marker is, you get that many additional points. So 1 to 8 points based on wherever this marker is, in addition to any nobles that you've earned during the game by impressing them with your awesome reputation. For the third expansion, you add in some starting cards. You shuffle these 7 cards, you turn over 3 of them at random, and each player chooses one of them. So instead of starting with the regular waitress and table and beer supplier, you start with one of these options. So maybe you get rid of a couple of guests and you move ahead on the monastery track, or you start with some advanced reputation. There's other things that come up as well. With the reputation module, you add in a bard. Only costs 1 money, and whenever a bard comes up, you move your reputation ahead by 1. You also shuffle in these 10 additional guests that have a little reputation symbol at the top, and they will either grant you a bard, or you move ahead in reputation, or they give you schnapps, and they interact as those expansions all pile up. With the 5th expansion, you're now adding a guest book. And the change is you flip over this little note here to keep track. You know you're counting guest. And you have all these signature tokens on each guest in the game. You're dropping a signature, and each time you pick up a guest, you look at the cost of that guest, and you put that signature in that column. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is a 5 cost guest, so it goes here. If I get another 5 cost guest, my reputation goes up by 1. If I get another one, I get a dishwasher. I get another one, I get a noble. And if I fill this horizontal row, I also get a noble. So it's this additional thing, this bonus for acquiring guests, in addition to managing my reputation, in addition to a different start, in addition to managing schnapps and these guests coming in, all this stuff working together, but ideally all driving towards acquiring nobles to get more points. I've played Die Tavernen im Tiefen Thal 4 times on a review copy from Schmidt Spiele, twice with 2 players, twice with 3. The game itself is very straightforward, as I've mentioned, but when I was initially reading the rules, it's only German rules in the box, English rules on BTG, initially reading the rules, nothing was coming together. I wasn't looking at the components, I was just trying to read it and put it all together in my head, but it's hard to keep track of all the moving parts. When you actually put it on the table and you start doing it, shuffle your deck, start laying things out till your tables are full. It's very straightforward and you see it immediately. And it's really the ideal way to teach and learn the game. But of course, you can't do that from the rule book. When you buy that box and you open it, you start looking at this 12-page rule book. And a 4-page supplement for the modules, for the expansions. It's a lot of stuff all at once. And again, it's very similar to Quacksalber, where you try to learn that game from the get-go. Try to get everything in your head. Okay, here's these 8 ingredients and all the different things they do. And here's what you're doing on a turn, and there's going to be event cards, there's other stuff. You try to put all that together. It's hard to absorb. And really the ideal way to teach Quacksalber, that I found at least, was to give each player their bag and just have them start drawing. And you tell them, oh wait, if you draw one more and this happens, you can bust. You don't have to, but it's up to you. And you don't worry about strategy or planning ahead. You're trying to teach them by doing. And Tavernen seems to be the same way. So after Quacksalber, after you stop, or you can get some points, you get some money. Here's what you can do with your money. You can buy these 6 things. You only have to teach 6 and not 8 because one of them doesn't come in until round 2 and one of them comes in round 3. And so you can teach the game bit by bit. And sure, maybe you can't plan ahead enough for what you're trying to do, but you're through 3 rounds of the game in 15 minutes. Whereas before, if I tried to teach it all, it'd be 15 minutes, we wouldn't even start. And so you can learn by putting it all together. Tavernen has kind of been the same way, where that first game was just like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I had to refer to the rules constantly as I start laying out the components and trying to teach people. Very forgiving people who were letting me teach them from the rule book. It just wasn't coming together. Then after that first game, oh, piece of cake. We'll play again immediately. We added the first expansion. It took almost no time at all just to learn the extra expansion. Everything else was already ingrained. Yeah, put out my deck, flip over, fill the tables. That's it. And then do some stuff. You can learn bit by bit in that game just by doing it, rather than trying to learn it all ahead of time. Especially with the modules. You can see where if you add all 4 modules, or expansions, they're called modules in the rules, if you add all 4, it's a lot to teach. And there's no way that you would want to teach someone all of that together. Because initially it seems kind of pointless. It seems hard to imagine how all this is going to come into play. So I played once with only the first expansion, and I played once with the first 2 expansions, so with a reputation. I haven't done the variable start. I have not done the signatures. Maybe they're easy as pie. Maybe they add a lot to the game. Again, I've played 4 times. I'm going to lay that out there. But adding the schnapps was adding lots of choices for what to do with these jesters and which side you want to use them and how you want to save up and when's the right time to use them for their particular power. I don't know. You don't know because you only learn by doing it. And then we played again with reputation, and it's like, well, now I can focus on money, I can focus on beer, or I can try to do both and push reputation. But sometimes you just are up to the whim of the dice with what you're drafting and what what's given to you based on what you draw from the deck and what comes up. Again, you're at the mercy of luck to some degree. Which of course, when I filmed the preview of the game at Shovar and Mesa, the presenter was talking about how people complain about bad luck at the dice. And I said, that's what losers say. And I have now been on the receiving end of that bad luck, being the loser myself in the game. So it's kind of interesting just to see that being thrown back in my face. It's hard to teach all at once. And so you want to teach it piecemeal just by doing. But of course, unless someone else taught you, you have to learn through the rules. Or, this video will get you started for the most part. And again, the game is very straightforward in its basic form. And that might be all you need. You might never touch the expansions. It might be only the promise of variability that you never dig into and you enjoy the base game enough. Because each time you teach someone, you're probably not going to want to teach them everything all at once. You just start. You play that. Get them comfortable. And then maybe next time, assuming there's no one new at the table, now we'll add something. We'll go a little further. Unless you're one of those people who wants to dive in with everything, good luck to you. Enjoy the game.